Welcome to the basics of photography. I will be showing you the basic functions of your camera and give you a few tips along the way. If you are a beginner, you are probably unsure on how to use your camera properly. My first advice is to look at your camera manual. It is full of information that is needed for your camera. The best place to start is with your shooting modes. Depending on your camera, your shooting modes will be found on the dial at the top labeled with M, AV, TV, P, and Auto. Some cameras have more. When you choose a shooting mode, it determines how your camera will react to you pressing the shutter button. Now, I am using a Canon Rebel T3, so your dial icons may look a little different depending on the camera you use, but the functions all function in the same way. If you shoot in automatic mode, which is usually represented by this green box, the camera chooses all of the settings for you and takes the best picture for the scene that you are in. This is the only mode where you do not have to set any settings. The P on your camera mode stands for program mode. You are able to set either the aperture or the shutter speed with this mode. If you set the aperture, the camera will adjust the shutter speed. If you set the shutter speed, the camera will adjust the aperture for you. Shutter priority is the next setting that we will be talking about. It is represented on the Canon Rebel as TV, but on Nikons it's usually represented as a S. Shutter priority is very similar to aperture. You set the shutter speed and the camera will set the aperture. The shutter speed determines the amount of time the shutter stays open when you are shooting a photograph. The longer the shutter stays open, the more light that passes through. If you wanted to freeze a fast-moving subject, such as sports, you would use a short shutter speed, such as 1/500 or 1/1000. If you want to blur a moving object, you would want to use a long shutter speed number, such as 1/15 or 1/30. I would suggest using a tripod. The next shooting mode that I will be talking about is the aperture priority mode, which is represented on my Canon Rebel as AV. This mode can be thought of as a semi-automatic mode. You set the aperture and the camera will automatically put in the settings for the shutter speed. Aperture is the size of the opening in the lens where the light is allowed to pass through. The larger the aperture hole, the more light that passes through. The smaller the hole, the less light that passes through. The aperture is measured by f-stops and is usually displayed as f2.0 or f2.8 or f5.6 or f12 or etc. The smaller the f-stop number, the larger the hole, and the larger the f-stop number, the smaller the hole. The last mode that I am going to talk about is the manual mode. The manual mode is represented with the M on your camera dial. The manual mode is exactly what it says. It gives you full control over the exposure. You can set the shutter speed, you can set the aperture, you can change the ISO. There is usually an exposure indicator on the screen that lets you know how over or underexposed the image will be.